Hello and welcome everyone to my very first Queen interview. And I am super excited to have Kirstin Eventyr here. Kirstin and I have known each other, I think, close to 25 years, went to the same graduate school in psychology. Kirstin has been a heart-centered therapist for 30 years and is an alchemist of herbs and energy and recently published her first book of poetry. And we will talk about that as we go into the interview. Anything else you want to say at this moment, Kirsten?
Mom of two, married 28 years. That's some cred right there.
Yes, for sure. Right, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when we think about the, Maiden Mother Crone triple goddess, and then consider that middle area that is, ripe for the picking and naming. So maybe we could start there. You had an initial inkling of something missing in that Maiden Mother Crone model years ago. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, when I was an undergraduate student at the Evergreen State College, I was taking a class. Um, it was something about the heart of the matter, like women's wisdom and women writers. And there was an assignment that I can't remember exactly, but the way I chose to respond to it was creating work that was maiden, mother, provider, crone. I really felt like maiden I could relate to, mother I knew I could relate to, and then it just seemed like there was a gap. It's like you don't just go from mother to crone, like there's this other role. And I didn't have another idea about it. I think I was kind of a budding feminist at the time. And so it was like, women can be providers too. So that's where I went with that missing place.
Mm. And how does that area of provider, how do you experience that territory now, having lived into that and grown into it? What's your sense of that?
Well, I like your model better. I don't know that provider was, I think that was a very limited interpretation. I like the queen uh, orientation better. Um, so I would say in the queen orientation, like what has been true is this sense of you're on one level, you're never really done being a mother, but that active mothering time is over. And I'm not a crone. Like that's just not right. Like I haven't landed in that like wizened kind of place. But that the place that I'm living into right now is a place of huge self-acceptance, um, and a high level of creative juiciness and a lot more kind of peace with myself and who I am in the world and how I interface with the world. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, you're fleshing it out, so to speak. Yeah.
Mhm.
And how would you flesh out what your sense of a queen is? Like, what's the potential for all women in this phase? What do you see as the possibility here, and what it takes to really embody that possibility?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like part of it is, getting to this phase is a lot of work. Like I mean you earn this. Like you climb the mountain and and there's something for you there, And so I think there's something about landing in this queen territory that is about I've really I've wrestled with life and myself and my own wounds, and I've come to a place of knowing that being me, just the way I am, is okay. That that this is the answer right here, that the answer is that nobody's ever been me before, nobody will ever be me again. I'm the only one that has my right direction and answer. I'm the oracle. Um, and that there's a freedom in answering to yourself and kind of unhooking from the culture at large, from that whole societal kind of grid that we get embedded into. I feel like the queen archetype is sort of outside of that. Like you've managed to get outside the machine, right? You're somehow outside of that mechanism of culture, in this way that there is a lot more freedom of movement and less being directed by the culture and more being directed by the internal nature.
Mm. I am so glad this is being recorded. That was really beautifully spoken.
Mm.
Yeah, I love this sense of earning it.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's we know women who might stay in maiden phase their whole life or might stay in mother phase their whole life. And so it really is quite a project to queen ourselves into this territory of, I maybe use the word self-reference.
Mhm.
One of the words I like to use is sovereignty.
Mm.
And I'm
Mhm.
just curious how you hold like sovereignty and being outside the matrix or the grid, and yet somehow not separate. You're still in relation. Can you talk a little bit about that in between, that thing of sovereignty and related to?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I also just want to say the word that came to me as you were talking about earning it is like initiation. Like each role has its initiatory quality, and I think the queen truly does as well. Um, but um but in terms of like how I am sort of a free agent, like that's kind of how I hold that sovereign position is I'm a free agent in life, and yet I am woven into life, and woven into community and woven into my own sort of culture of care, which to me is separate from the machine. Like when I talk about the machine, in some ways I'm talking about patriarchy and white supremacy and like these systems and structures that are inhumane, that are not designed for humans, and yet we like plug along through them and feel like something's wrong with us because we're not, fluidly maneuvering them. And so for me, there is part of it is about how do I see it clearly, you know, and part of seeing it clearly is I feel like you start to see it clearly as you disentangle from it. That stops being just the soup that you're swimming in. And it has become more and more clear to me, like, okay, that's something else that is not about my community. That's not about my relationships with life. And I still have a relationship to it, right? Like it's not like it's like, oh, I see it and now I'm clear from it. It's not like that at all. Like I engage it every day, every single day. It just is not, it doesn't have a right to be inside me anymore, right? It doesn't, and so that's, I think, super clarifying. It allows me to recognize myself as separate from and not I don't have to adhere by or to those rules. And I see that in my private practice, like so much of what bogs women down is feeling like they should be something to feed the machine, um, they're feeding the machine wrong or not good enough or whatever, and it's not the case. It's like if you're really engaged with your organic internal wisdom and intelligence, it's very clear that that's not something you probably want to serve. and it's not really serving you.
Mhm. Yeah, so that brings me to the question of how do we make that kind of shift where we contact ourselves and start trusting our own voice instead of the external voice, and instead of, how do we stop that shape shifting into what the machine or overculture says women can and should be,
Mhm.
and then claiming what's actually true and stop that shape shifting. What was your journey around that, and what helped you?
It's a really good question. I want to answer that, and I'm kind of, there's something in me that's like kind of got caught in this, like, is this idea around how do you see the thing? How do you see the thing in the first place?
Yeah.
And and I think the hard part about it is being willing to engage in the pain of how it harms us, and how it harms everyone, and like particularly as white people being willing to endure the pain of how much harm has been done to people of color all over the world, how much colonization has just screwed over everybody, and how it's screwed over, white people too. Like it harms everyone, and so I think that, and it's like for men, like the willingness to see how women have been harmed, and for women being able to be willing to see how we've been harmed, like that. There's a lot of pain to get there. So maybe I am answering your question, that's part of it, is being willing to encounter the pain of the harm that the mechanism has wrought on you and those you love, and the life that maybe you want to live. So that was certainly a part of my journey for sure. And ask me again or more, and I can answer the part that I didn't answer if there is something.
That was great. So I asked, well, how do we stop shape shifting into what
Oh yeah.
the overculture wants us or
Yeah.
thinks women should be, and start claiming our own truth? And I love, the first step is to see it, and then pointing out that the first step of seeing it is to actually encounter the suffering that that structure causes men, women, white bodies, bodies of culture and color.
Hmm.
So I'm wondering what helped you do that metabolizing,
Hmm.
encounter with the pain, and then the reclamation of
Hmm.
your truth as opposed to being tangled with the overculture truth.
Yeah, thank you. I think, I think I got a little lucky, and maybe I don't, maybe this isn't true, but and this is a little of an astrological take, but I think having my moon in Taurus is sort of like, it's just a comfy place in relationship to emotion, in that I trust it, in that I feel I really trust sorrow, I trust grief, I trust pain, I trust rage, I trust fear. Like I really deeply trust my emotional nature. And so encountering things that bring up uncomfortable feelings, doesn't throw me quite as much. So I think that's would maybe be a piece I would suggest to folks, is like, maybe, the uncomfortable feelings are trustworthy, and they're not trying to camp out. They don't want to live with you forever. You can encounter them, and they can deliver a message and then move on. And there's something in me that really that knows that. I mean, it's not even believes it. Like I've had that experience bajillions of times in my life. And so being able to trust pain and let it move through and deliver its message, and then I get to metabolize it and move on with that new piece of wisdom. So that's kind of the way in which I have been maybe a little more sturdy. Like I feel like I'm a little lucky to have that orientation. It's served me really, really well.
Mhm.
And has helped me to enable it. But at the same time, it's so easy to avoid. When you're living in the culture, it's so easy to avoid. Like at one point, I just really committed that I was going to read a book every couple of months that was about something that I knew I wanted to understand and know about, whether that was, a feminist orientation or an anti-racist orientation or an anti-colonialism orientation or, whatever, all of those different ways of looking at it. And the stories hurt, like it hurt. It was hard. It was painful. It was difficult to educate myself in that way. And I just felt very committed to it. I felt really committed to it. And it has enabled me to have more humility and to be a safer person on the planet for everyone else. Um, and to not be separate from everyone else.
Closes the gap and opens the heart.
Yeah, yeah, that we're all humans here, and being human is hard. And it's hard for all of us in different ways. Um, but yeah, I don't feel set apart from life
Mhm.
and the pain therein.
Right. So that distancing gesture of keeping pain away also keeps other people away. And as you encounter the suffering and our role in contributing to other people's suffering, yeah, that kind of softens that wall.
Mm.
The words that just came to me is a reconnection with your humanity, with our humanity as we do that.
Mhm.
And I'm struck by you saying not so separate, right? And that brings me to how embodied spiritual awakening feeds into this evolution into the queen. If part of being a queen is the capacity to bear witness,
Mm.
undefended encounter with life,
Mhm.
right? And what does that mean in terms of being a queen and what we do and how we are?
Mhm.
Did you
Yeah.
hear the question? I kind of rambled on beyond it.
I got it. I think I got what you're asking. And honestly, like you're the one who helped me connect those dots. That was an integral part of that is sort of the initiation on some level of holding that way of being in life is that embodied awakening. Yeah, I feel like in some ways the embodied awakening is what it is to really become an adult. Um, to really occupy that territory of adulthood. And what I say by what I mean by that is a total and complete recognition of my it's like responsibility to myself and to all of life because I'm not all of life. Um, and when I say responsibility, I don't mean like, oh, I'm responsible. Like I'm not holding it like a burden. It's not like that. It's like I have the privilege to be Kirstin and I want to be me in the fullest way. And to be me in the fullest way is to be in recognition that I'm absolutely responsible for whatever choices I make, for whatever I do or don't do. Like that's me. And that this me is a I don't know what I'm like having a hard. This Kirsten is that droplet in the ocean, right? That droplet that has come separate for a moment, that I'm just a particular fragment of light that is me, but that I am also all of the light that is everyone and is everything. And that gives me an enormous sense of belonging, for one thing. I feel very much that I get to be here. Like I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be here as me specifically. Like that's my job, is to be here as myself. And that this me as myself has sort of a unique gaze on things, that is the gaze of the infinite on some level, right? And that there is nothing that isn't the infinite. And so there is this glorious miracle of getting to exist as myself and getting to encounter all of the other faces of the great mystery. And yeah, just what an unbelievable blessing that is, and how much ballast it gives me as a human, to hold this kind of queen territory, right? Um, yeah, I think that says it.
Thank you. I love that sensation of ballast. And we're starting to go into the territory of paradox, of being this unique perspective, this unique spark of the infinite, and yet also being the infinite, which how can you can never resolve the paradox of being this uniqueness and also being all of it. And yet something happens when we have that recognition in an embodied way. Um, and I'm wondering if you could say just a little bit more of how, um, so you said awakening, this embodied awakening that in the Trillium Awakening path we call whole being realization.
Mm.
It's not a transcendent up and away. It's down into the body and through the body into the web of life. And you alluded to the queen becoming a queen is an initiatory process, and that this realization is part of that initiation into adulthood. Like, what does that make possible that you can't, like, we can still grow as women and untangle from the patriarchy and learn to trust ourselves more and more as we move towards queenhood. But what is it about the awakening that takes it to the next level?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. We'll see if I can if I can do it any justice, because it's hard to explain in some ways. And it's been an evolutionary process. It's been, I don't know, around 10 years or something since my awakening, and living into it has been I've evolved. I've grown quite a lot. Um I would say, one of the major things is my capacity to trust life. Like I feel very deeply landed in that, knowing that there's nothing that isn't God, that isn't the infinite, that isn't the magical miracle of the all of it. Like there's nothing that's not that. And so, it's not that extremely painful, terrible things don't happen in my life or in my world, but I'm more likely to approach those things, um, writhing and uncomfortable, but also curious, also with a bit of a trusting heart, a little bit of a like, what is this for me? Where is this trying to take me? Um, and that capacity to partner in that trusting way with what is, I feel like I don't know that that would have been possible without that absolute recognition, internal unshakable knowing that I can trust life as it is. I would say that's probably the fundamental shift. but it's also just, it's helped me to just soften into being myself, to relax into being myself. That it's sort of like, in some ways I think, well, there's not a lot of things we can know for sure as humans, right? Like, there's not much. But one thing I can know for sure is that I am myself, and I landed on this planet as myself. So there's something about what this Kirstinness is that is mine, for one thing, my responsibility and my deal to do it. But how could there be something wrong with it? Do you know what I mean? Like, how could there be something wrong? I mean, not that I don't screw stuff up, not that I don't make mistakes all day long, but that there is nothing fundamentally wrong with my nature and with my Kirstinness. And that I'm just growing more and more deeply into opening to what I'm about, what I'm designed to do, what I came here to engage, you know, for my own satisfaction and pleasure, and ideally that also serves life and my community and those near to me as well.
Yeah, and not having to know exactly how your ripple does its magic, but
Mhm.
just knowing that your ripple is yours to give.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I have a similar sense of how the awakening is it gives me the depth and breadth and capacity to unwind those places that have been stuck, have been conditioned. And that trust also allows me to say, oh, it's okay for me to like this, but not like that. It's okay for me to say I need rest right now, and the world isn't going to crash on its axis if I take a break in this moment. So there's some beautiful reciprocity of trusting self and trusting life that's part of this territory and allows us to become more who we are.
for sure. And I know for myself, I spent so much time making myself wrong. Like, that was also such a huge unraveling for me, is how constant I was making myself and life wrong. I shouldn't be feeling the way that I'm feeling. I shouldn't have said the thing I said. I shouldn't, like, I mean, ad infinitum, and that became part of my unraveling work. Is like, what if it's okay that how I feel is okay? What if it's okay that I made the mistake that I made? What if it's okay that whatever, that, like, and then what if it's okay that the external world is doing what it's doing? Um, so that was also that orientation was a game changer for me too.
Mhm.
Because it just took up so much time and energy. It's like, once that was off the table, it's like, wow, I've got a lot more space to entertain other things.
Such as poetry.
Yeah, such as poetry, for example. Yeah.
So tell us about how that came to be, right? So there's how we manifested, created, managed, navigated life before awakening, and then there's a big shift if trust becomes the foundation, and how we create, generate, manifest, partner. I think you said partnership with life. Talk about how that's different and how maybe poetry is an example of that difference, if that feels right.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, poetry for me started, I mean, I've always kind of been interested in poetry. And actually what I've really been interested in is succinct, beautiful, accessible ways of communicating truth.
Mm.
That's my favorite. right? Um, and so that's something I've always loved. And when I was there was a period of time in the early 2000s where I was working with Malidoma Some, who's an African shaman, and Francis Weller, who's a psychotherapist and has written a book on grief. And in their work together, Francis would read sacred poetry. And it was such a profound teaching tool for me. Like it just landed for me in such a big way. And it was something I would bring to my own teaching. It would be something I would bring to clients sometimes. And then I was at a retreat in Thailand with Trillium Awakening in the year 2020, right before it all went down. And I was teaching there. I was a Trillium teacher at the time, and I was bringing poetry, and I had so many people ask, when are you going to start writing? When are you going to bring your poetry? And it was funny that it had never really occurred to me. um I was just so enjoying everybody else's way. And then Joanne Lee, our friend and also a Trillium teacher, she has a book called Create, and it's a whole beautiful writing process. And I did a deep dive into that. And then another Trillium teacher, Subaga, began teaching a poetry class. And then all of that just came together. And I was writing, writing, writing. That's maybe a lot more of a detail than you need, but the what it's given me in terms of awakening and the queen kind of part is trusting my voice, trusting what I think is important to write, um, and trusting that it has value. That what I have to say and the way that I have to say it has value, because it's really easy to look at my book and go, other people have said these things before. It's like, yeah, other people have said everything before. You know what I mean? Like in some ways, and that doesn't mean that my way won't be valuable, in some way or to someone. And it's such a pleasure to me. And it helps me. I mean, it really helps me to explore difficult questions too. Like if I'm really trying to figure something out, I will often bring it into a poetic form. Um, yeah, dreams too, will impact that.
Mhm. And is there a way that you gave voice and birth to the poems that's different than how you probably would have done it before your awakening?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of what I have to say is some of what we're talking about. I mean, a lot of what I'm saying, at least in this book, Calamity's Compass, and the title is like that is the calamity. Calamity, is your compass. Like that can take you somewhere. And that's partly what was happening in 2020. Is like here we are descended into chaos. And my writing was very much about using chaos with a capital C as like a deity, like chaos as a trustworthy entity that was bringing something that we needed really badly. And that's sort of how part of what informed this whole collection was that notion, which I could not have come to without that embodied awakening. I mean, I could have gotten it on a mental level, you know um and I was getting it on a mental level when I was working with Malidoma. That was a big part of how he was trying to teach me, was about this idea that maybe trouble, maybe pain, maybe difficulty is actually your mentor, um, rather than, being in this, it shouldn't be this way.
Mhm. Right, that resistance, that stance of I don't like how this is, I don't like how the world is, I don't like how something about me is, I don't like how something about my partner, that resistance can be really draining and um, and yet awakening, there's a way in which we can be embedded with life exactly as it is in this moment and not have resistance to it,
Mhm.
which frees up a lot of energy. And yet there's this impulse to create or to add more beauty or love into the world. And I'm curious, the way I conceive of the Queen's initiatory process is having that whole being realization, and getting there is climbing up a hill. It's kind of a gritty path. Embodied awakening is not for the timid, should we say?
Yeah.
But then even post awakening, like both of us have been 10 years into this, there's a lot of post of awakening reconfiguration that happens that's pretty challenging.
Mm.
And yet I have a sense, and part of the reason I wanted to interview you in particular is that we're both, that's that 80-20% rule. Maybe 80% of the bulk of our, you know, process and shadow and conditioning work is done. And now there's some breathing room to create and
Mhm.
offer ourselves to the world. And my hunch is that for women at this stage, after this reconfiguration, and the turbulence is not quite so turbulent, there's this impulse to serve, to offer, to uh, co-create with life. I'm wondering if you have a sense of that now, as you know, I know you have a very busy life, but it's not a roiling internal process so much anymore. If you have a sense of what your queenhood might be wanting to express, poetry, the book was a first birth
Mm.
from that territory, it seems. But I don't care. Yeah, you got my question.
I think so. Yeah. Well, I definitely still feel like I have more writing to do. Like there's more poetry that I want to write. Um, there's might be a book of something else. I don't know for sure. We'll see, you know. I mean, right at the moment, I feel like I'm wanting beauty is what I want. I want more beauty. So like yeah, I feel like I'm at this point, like I'm really settling into like, what do I really deeply value? You know, it's like I really value relationships. I really value beauty. I really value creative process. I really value stability. Like there are some pieces that are important to me that I'm kind of fluffing, you know, in my life, kind of fluffing them up. Um, and so that feels very real to me. And then there's, always, some bigger question I'm chewing on, um, and, or questions I'm chewing on. And right now I'm chewing on the question around belonging and, with so many people in, in transit and transition refugees in the world, and white people living in North America, it's like, we came unbidden. I guess refugees come unbidden too, but are welcomed. It's like you get to come. Nobody gave us that kind of welcome or knew what we were doing exactly, but whatever. But that sort of idea of how do we get to belong on the planet regardless of where we are, and how do we get to have relationship with our own indigenousness to the earth without infringing on anybody else's ways, without trying to take over anything, that's just like just right here. What's my relationship to the elements? What's my relationship to the earth and to the land and to community and to being alive and to contribution and listening to ancestors and guidance and all of that.
That is a powerful inquiry.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I appreciated what you said earlier. Well, this is new territory, right? Um, that this embodied awakening consciousness, embodied realization is available with Trillium. Hundreds of people have landed here in our local Olympia community. More than half of the members of our community circle have landed in a permanent, stabilized realization, not a glimpse, but like a fundamentally new way of being in a new reality. And what does it mean to be a human on the planet with this knowing and this shift in identity of being non-separate? And one of the things in Trillium too is mutuality. So the non-separate recognition is what I do to you, I'm doing to myself. May not be in the foreground of what I'm seeing, but it's part of this. Thich Nhat Hanh used the word interbeing. So, yeah, Dwayne Elgin also has a couple books, Choosing Earth and The Living Universe. And he talks about becoming a citizen of the planet. And, this queenhood, I think, is an initiation into becoming a citizen of the planet, sovereign, so that we can sense, deeper truth, but also undefended so that we can respond to the world in a unique and authentic way, not from a should, but here's my piece, And so for me, awakened activism has always been awake to the interbeing, awake to the social dynamics and ecological dynamics, but I just sing my song and trust that it weaves into the fabric of the whole thing evolving. Blah, blah, blah. That was a long riff off of what you were sharing, but I just feel how your book of poetry is a beautiful act of awakened activism. And it's not that drivenness. It's not, we're going to overcome. We're not using the sword to fight the sword. It's, I'm opening a portal to a whole new way of being together. So I'm wondering if you'd like to read a poem or two, the village poem that you just shared the other day. I know it's not in your book, but it seems to be in the territory.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. Let me
I just want to let people know I will put information about Kirstin's book in the show notes, so you'll be able to get your copy right away because it's beautiful, beautiful medicine.
Thank you. All right, well, I'll start with that one, The Village.
Thank you.
When I say the village, I mean you. I mean you and the driver who hurt my feelings. I mean the one who reached for me as she died, and the salmon on their way home. When I say the village, I mean you and the man who delivers our milk. I mean the ravens with their throaty water talk, and my neighbor who waves a flag that says Trump was right about everything. When I say the village, I mean you and how we all have to belong somewhere. So how about here? And how about now? And how about with those we find here? When I speak of the village, I mean you and me and the nearby mountain and the Salish Sea. I mean the one who stole the plaid blanket and ran, and the delivery driver who greets the cat. I mean the gal on the street who saw me glowing and said, "Look at you glow." When I say the village, I'm talking about you and the blackberry bramble and the free pile on the corner and the Narcan I carry in my purse. I'm talking about the one I cannot forgive and the one who relaxed when she saw my face. I'm talking about Dave at the post office with the fresh gash on his head and the man with the pipe who made it. When I say village, I mean no one is left out. And we don't get to choose. It's whoever's around. I'm talking about the laugh shared with the bakers who are so proud of their bread, and the coyotes that howl and wake me in the night, and the recognition that I need help. When I say village, I mean you, glorious, weird, imperfect folk. That's all we've got. It has to be enough. This is our village. So that one will come out in another book. We'll see.
So there's a preview of coming attractions. We're tempting our audience here.
And this one is from Calamity's Compass, and it's called Oracle. It's just a short one. Trust your life just as it is. It too seeks your hand to hold. It too urges you to believe that what you find inside is the path itself. Your felt sense inside is devoted to you. Steadfast is its name. No one loves you more.
Mm. Mm.
So yeah, you can get this wonderful book, Calamity's Compass, anywhere you buy books.
So you can go to your local bookstore and have them order a copy for you. And if that's not an option, Amazon's always there, or the publisher itself.
And betterwaybooks.com is another way to order online. They have everything, just like Amazon does, but it's a better way. It's not Amazon. If you care about such things.
Well, yeah, we'll put all that in the show notes. Anything you want to say in closing, or let the poetry do its?
I think the poetry did a good job.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kirsten. I've
Yeah.
been nourished by you, inspired, and so grateful for your sisterhood into this territory of Queen. And I know we're making up as we go along, and we get to.
Yes, indeed. Well,
And this will not be the last time you'll hear of Kirsten. There'll be more in the future. All right. Thank you all. Bye for now.